I don't know how I managed to read all these books, but here we are. Hello and welcome to my channel, The Danish Readaholic. Today I'm gonna be doing my wrap-up. Okay, so I think without further ado, let's just get on with it because we do have a couple of books to talk about. I managed to read 12 books this month. I know, who am I? My total page count ended up being 2,554, and that averages out to around 210 pages per book. Let's just get on with the stats. Next up, we have the authors. I have 9 new to me authors, and I have 2 authors that I have read before. I know I read 12 books, but 2 of the books were by the same author, which is why there's only 11 different authors. Next up, we have star rating, and as you can see, it's fairly spread out. I have 2 2 stars, 6 3 stars, 2 4 stars, and 2 5 stars. As for the representation, once again, fairly spread out. There is 1 book with mental health representation, 1 book with LGBTQ+ representation, 1 book with racial representation, 1 book with disability representation, 3 books with multiple types of representation, and 5 books with no representation whatsoever. When I say there's no representation, there may be a little, but not enough for me to feel like it is actually properly represented. So that is why that it would only be in like the none category. Then we have author nationality. We have 5 authors from Denmark. We have 4 authors from the US. We have 1 author from Guam, which is awesome. I've never read anything from that country before. And then we have 1 author from Australia. And now we're getting to the genre. We have 6 fantasy books, which is the biggest category of genre picks, I guess. We have 1 contemporary, we have 1 thriller horror, we have 1 nonfiction, and we have 3 miscellaneous. And miscellaneous in this case will be short story collections, but in general it is books that does not fit into any of the other categories. I had debated putting the short stories into the respected genre that they fit, but some of them were like very different from story to story within the book, whether it would be a thriller or regular contemporary or a mystery, so it would fit multiple genres. So I ended up putting the short story collections in miscellaneous. Next up, we have the type of book. We have 4 books that were part of a series, and we have 8 books that were standalones. Next up, we have the intended audience. We have 5 books that were middle grade. We have 5 books that were YA. We have 1 book that I put as new adult. And we have 1 book in adult. For me, the line between YA and new adult is sometimes a little bit blurred, so I'm just going to do what feels right to me. So it might not be what they're actually categorized as, but that is what I feel they should be. So, there's that. Next up, we have the format. I read 2 books as audio, and the remaining 10 were physical reads. Next up, we have the sources. I have 5 books that were from my owned TBR. I had 1 book that I had hauled this year, and I had 6 books that I borrowed at the library. Finally, we're at the releases, and all books were released prior to 2022. Now, with all the stats out of the way, I think we should go on to talking more about the books. I'm gonna be talking about some of the shorter books at first, where I don't really have that much to say, and then we're gonna move on to the books where I have more of an opinion about the book itself. First up, we have Hiiya, which is by Gunvor Ganer Kreisberg. This is a Danish author. I have not read anything by this author before, and this book follows this little fairy that we have here on the front page. Her name is Hiiya, and she is a fairy who has wings made of like spider web, and she keeps destroying them. This book is called De Nye Vinger, which is translated to The New Wings. It's a middle grade. I would say it is a middle grade bordering on children's book. I am currently looking for books to read to my nieces once they get old enough to understand. One of them is almost there. And this one, in my opinion, would be a really great start, I think. I do have a couple of books myself. I have the Lucids series that I love and that I want to introduce to them. But I also wanted something else because I don't have that many Danish books or books that have been translated to Danish that I want to read to them, because most of the middle grade that I read is English. So I have been trying to look into more books like this that are like bordering on children's books but still have some kind of substance to them. And this one to me was a really, really great pick. I really liked it, and I felt like it had like great subjects and something that you can learn from it and not only be like a story to follow, if that makes sense. So this is one of the books that I've recently read, and I used it to also fulfill one of the prompts for my game. I really liked it. As far as I know, this hasn't been translated to English, so if you're Danish and watching this and are looking for something to read to your kids, I would recommend this series. I think I should just get some of the Danish books out of the way because I can't really recommend them unless they've been translated. So next up we have Isens Hjerte, translated to The Heart of Ice. This is by Ida Marie Renthoff. I didn't care for this. This is also a middle grade bordering on children's, but much closer to being children's in my opinion. The difference to me from this to the other is that I didn't feel like I learned anything from this. It didn't have like an underlying lesson to learn from it. It was just a story, and that is fine. I just didn't care for the story either. We follow this girl, I don't remember her name. Her name is Ira, I would say in English. And then she is the only person who can do this thing to bring the magic to this realm of ice. And her grandmother is the only other person who can do it, and when she dies, the task will be passed on to Ira. In the beginning, the grandmother dies, and Ira has to do this task, but at the same time, there's this other threat, and the ice is melting. There's just a lot of stuff happening on 67 pages, and it was too much for me to want to continue with the series. So this is one of my 2 stars for the month, and I am not going to be continuing this series, and I am also not going to be reading this to my nieces. Next up we have Elektriske Heidi. This is a book that my mom read to me when I was younger. I love it. I loved it back then, still love it now. We follow these 2 kids that need a babysitter because their dad is a really famous hairdresser and their mother works at like a train. She is a train hostess thing. Stewardess? I don't know what it's called. But she works at a train. So basically they need a nanny and they want something really fun. They want someone really fun and entertaining. And when their nanny finally comes, it is this boring lady who just is very gray and very boring until the parents leave. Then she turns into Electric Heidi, which is what the title would be in English. And she tells all of these stories about her past and her life just in general, and it is just really great. One of the things that I also really like about this is that I feel like there is an underlying message and lesson to be learned, as I said before, with each of the stories that she tells when she's there to babysit. Once again, I feel like this is a great children's book. This is definitely more children. And also, there is a CD with songs from the book. I'm just so happy that I reread this, or read it, I don't know, re-experienced the story. Let's call it that. Then we get to the short stories. First up, I read Når lyset slukkes, When the Light is Turned Off by Kenneth Bøge Andersen. I really like this. These are horror thriller stories with different kind of creatures. Some of them just normal people, I think, and others are actual monsters. There were definitely some in here that kind of shook me to my core, even though that they're middle grades. One of them is about hypnosis, and that was really just not fun. Another was about a hunter, like in a hunter cabin thing. And the final one was about, like, my 3 favorites was about a circus, I think. Yes, and that was also just oof. But I really, really like it, and I recommend. This has not been translated to English as far as I know, so I recommend to people who can speak Danish. or read Danish. I'm gonna talk about the next two together, kind of, because by the same author. So I read these two, both of them are short story collections. One is called Ned Minaya and the other is called Pendant. So it's basically Night with Naya, because Naya is a name, and the Panther Knight. I did not like Night with Naya. That was the worst one. I gave it 2 stars, and I'm not gonna read it again. It was... no. The first 3 stories were great. The rest, I was just struggling to get through it. This one, on the other hand, I really liked it. I gave it either 3 or 4 stars, I don't remember. I really, really enjoyed it. Some of the stories were just really, really great and really fun. So, yay! So that was all the Danish books that I read, so let me move on from this. Next up, I have Legendary Ladies by Anne Shen. This is a non-fiction about goddesses, and I really, really liked it. I love mythology. It is so amazing and I am just here for it. So obviously I was gonna like this. This is just explaining the different goddesses, and I recommend, not only for the facts that I learned about the goddesses, but also because of the artwork that are present in this. It is absolutely phenomenal, so yes, give it a read. I'm not going to be talking more about this because I did talk a lot about it in my haul. If not for the mythology, then for the artwork. I'm just going to pull down the blinds. I'm sorry if this changed the light, but the light from outside was just really bothering. Next up, I also read Horror Store. I actually listened to this on audio, even though I had this edition that I'd gotten at the library. I gave it 3 stars, I think. It was fine. I was hoping that this would be a thriller. And correct me if I'm wrong, I do not really know the difference between thriller and horror, but in my opinion, a thriller is something that could potentially happen in real life, whereas horror is more with monsters, ghosts, and shit. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it is with like slasher stuff. I don't know. But to me, this was not it. I liked it, but the ghost aspect, no. I had hoped it was a thriller. I had hoped that there would be like a crazy serial killer on the loose in this store, and no, there wasn't. I like the characters. I like the idea. I like the way that it was built. I didn't like the ghosts. And since that was supposed to be the scary part, I was just a little bit bored. Sorry, Gemma. I'm really, really sorry. I wanted to like it. I gave it 3 stars. And it was fine. I'm glad I read it. I really like as I said, I like the concept, I like the idea, I like it, but it just wasn't really for me. Okay, we have 4 books left. 4 books left. We can do it. I really liked this. I gave this 5 stars, actually. I was not expecting to. We follow, what's his name? Cass, I think. His real name is Cassiopeus, and he hates his name. So he is being called Cassia by people he grew up with, and he asks people to call him Cass. We basically follow Cass, who is returning from years in imprisonment. He is returning back to his home to find that the king and queen are living there because there is this plague basically killing everyone. And for some reason, the place that he lives hasn't been hit as hard as everywhere else. When he returns, so one of the first things that happens is the ceremony for the new prince, for the baby. And there is an assassination attempt on the baby. And Cass saves this baby. And then everybody is obviously freaking out and trying to figure out who tried to kill this baby, and then a lot of mysteries unfolds. It is just really great. I really, really liked it, and there is a lot more about Cassiopeus that I'm not gonna tell you because that is spoilery and something I feel like you should experience on your own, but I would definitely recommend Year of the Reaper. It took me by surprise, and it is just a really great book. It is a standalone. I wish there were more. It's fine. It's good. Next up, we have A Court of Thorns and Roses. I listened to this on audio, and don't do that. Don't do that. I felt like it was so awkward to have a person read the smutty scenes that were in here, to read them aloud to me. That was just not it. Don't do that. Aside from that, I did have some things that I wanted to say. Why is everyone growling? I feel like every time a man says a line in this, he growls. The first couple of times I was like, okay, fine, he growled, however that works. But it was every single fucking time that a man said a sentence. Either it was supposed to be like a sensual thing, or it was because he was angry. It was either or, but it was used in this, like, in both instances. They growl all the freaking time. I cannot. And there was also something that the ladies did. Every time a woman said something, she clicked her tongue. I don't think I would have noticed it and had that big of an issue with it if I read it myself. But since I heard it as an audio, I just noticed every single time that somebody growled or clicked their tongue. And it pissed me off, and I don't know why. Also, I don't like how fast she fell for Tamlin. Nope. No thanks. Also, I know that we're not supposed to like Tamlin, later on at least, so I don't trust him at all. Anything that he did where I was like, normally I would have liked it, I would have been like, ooh yeah, enemies to lovers, we like that. Anything he did, I couldn't. I didn't trust him at all. I was just not there for it, and I didn't fall in love with him like I was supposed to be completely betrayed when he turns out to be the bad guy, blah blah blah. No. I did like Rhys though, and I have a feeling that I'm gonna continue to like him. I don't care much for Feyre as of right now. I really like Nesta, but I've heard that that might change. I don't like Elaine. She pisses me off. I have a lot of feelings, but I'm gonna put this away because it has been a long video because there's a lot of books to talk about, but I gave it 3 stars. I have heard from multiple people that this is a series where you need to move on from the first book even if you don't like it. So I am going to be doing that and then making my final decisions about whether or not I'm going to continue with the series when I get to the second book. When I finish it, I meant to say. Next up, we have Fire with Fire by Destiny Soria. This is an urban fantasy, and I didn't know that. This is an urban fantasy following dragon slayers, where one of them ends up having a magical bond with a dragon. I gave it 3 stars. I have some things. First up, I don't like urban fantasy. I really don't. I don't like the pop culture references. I don't want my dragon slayers to talk about Billie Eilish. Is that too much to ask? I didn't hate it. It's just I don't want the pop culture references. Also, in the beginning, I did not like Dani, one of the main characters. I did not like her. She pissed me off. She was annoying. She felt like everybody was doing the most to make her uncomfortable. There was this one scene, and I can talk about it because it's very early. Her ex-best friend comes back to town. She tried to kiss her ex-best friend before said friend left town. She feels that her coming back to town is a personal attack on Dani, and her coming over to talk to Dani is just the worst, and how could you do this to me? She is just awful. She's just coming over to say hello. But she was like, why didn't she tell me before that she was back? I mean, well, she was telling you now. Pissed me off. In the beginning, I didn't like Dani. I did like Eden, and then it switched. And towards the end, I didn't like Eden, but I liked Dani, and then in the end, I kind of felt meh about both of them. Do with that what you will. I liked the story, kind of. It was interesting, and sometimes I could forget the urban fantasy element. I wish it wasn't an urban fantasy, but it was fine. I gave it 3 stars. The final book. The Prison Healer. 5 stars. This book had me shooketh. I kind of wish that I had finished this book on a live stream so people could see my reaction. I'm just really excited to continue with this series, and hopefully I can do so in this month because, oh my god, I need to know what happens. In this, we follow Kiva. In this, we follow Kiva, who is a prison healer. Like, she is the healer at this prison called Salindov. One day, this Queen of the Rebellion is taken to the prison, and Kiva gets a message from her family saying, keep her alive, we're coming. This rebel queen is sentenced to the trials by ordeal, and in order to save her, Kiva volunteers to take her place in the trials. It's insane. I'm not gonna say more, I'm just gonna recommend this because, oh my god, this was so much better than I expected. So, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment telling me what your favorite read of April was. I would really like to know. If you just want to let me know that you're here but don't know what to comment, you can always leave a green heart. If you like this video, please hit the like icon, and if you want to see more of my bookish content, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It would just mean the world to me. And until I see you next time, bye!